Her blind girl and a trauma-scarred horse find an unexpected chance to overcome limits and prove that true strength comes from the heart. The sun had not yet fully risen over the mountains of Aspen when Emily was already up, her small fingers gliding over the braille clock beside her bed. 6 in the morning. A smile lit up her face as she prepared for another special day with Starlight, her guide horse. Her 8 years of life were filled with daily challenges, but none of them seemed so big when she was by the side of her faithful companion. Claire, her mother, was already waiting for her in the kitchen with a steaming cup of hot chocolate, a tradition on the cold mornings of the mountain region. The familiar aroma guided Emily to her usual chair, her small hands finding the mug with trained precision. "Starlight is especially excited to see you today," Claire remarked, watching her daughter sip the chocolate carefully. "John, the caretaker, said he neighed several times when he passed by your favorite brush." The girl smiled, her eyes, though deprived of sight, shining with their own light. "He always knows when I'm coming to visit him, Mum. It's like we can talk without words." The Adaptive Riding Center was just 15 minutes from home, a route Emily knew by heart. Every curve, every change in the pavement, every different scent from the trees lining the path, everything was mapped in her mind, with extraordinary precision. As they arrived, the familiar smell of the stables enveloped Emily like a warm hug. Her steps, cautious in other environments, gained confidence there. The sound of Starlight's hooves gently tapping against the wooden floor was like a melody only she could truly appreciate. "Good morning, Princess." Marianne's cheerful voice echoed down the hallway. "Starlight is looking especially dashing today. I think he got all dressed up for you." Emily approached the stall, her hands finding the wooden planks that separated her from her friend. Starlight's soft muzzle touched her fingers gently, a gesture of recognition that made her heart overflow with joy. "Can I brush him today, Mary?" Emily asked, already familiar with every inch of her companion's soft coat. "Of course. You're the best groom Starlight has ever had," Marianne replied, guiding the girl's hands to the brush. The ritual of preparing for the ride was a sacred moment for Emily. Every brushstroke, every caress on Starlight's silky coat, every word whispered into the animal's ear, it was all part of a deep connection that transcended the need for sight. "Did you know Starlight has a new trick to show you today?" commented Marianne, helping Emily put the adapted equipment on the horse. "He learned to do a special bow when he hears your voice." Emily's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? How does he do it?" "How about we find out together during the training," suggested the instructor, helping Emily mount. The feel of the leather saddle beneath her legs was comforting. There, mounted on Starlight, Emily felt free from any limitation. The world opened up in sensations, the gentle wind on her face, the rhythmic movement of the horse, the sounds of nature all around. The training track was perfect that morning. The dew still covered the grass on the sides, creating a fresh scent that mingled with the aroma of the pine trees. Other horses and students were beginning to arrive, but for Emily and Starlight, that moment belonged only to them. "Shall we start with a gentle ride around the outer track?" proposed Marianne, walking alongside the two. "The day is perfect for practicing the new orientation techniques." Emily nodded, her hands holding the reins with the confidence of someone who knows every reaction of her companion. Starlight responded to the slightest touch, starting a steady pace along the track. The sound of his hooves against the ground was like a metronome, maintaining a perfect rhythm that allowed the girl to create a mental map of the course. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like, tell us which city you're watching us from, and stay tuned. The morning continued its perfect course at the Equestrian Center. Emily and Starlight performed their synchronized dance along the track, while Marianne guided their movements with soft, precise words. The connection between the girl and the horse was something that impressed everyone who watched. Every command was met with an almost supernatural harmony. "Now let's try that special bow," announced Marianne, positioning herself strategically. "Emily, call Starlight like you always do." The girl leaned slightly over the horse's neck, her fingers stroking the silky mane. "Come on, my friend," she whispered in her sweet voice. "Show your new art." The horse, as if understanding every word, began to bend its front legs in a graceful motion. Emily could feel every muscle of Starlight moving beneath her, creating a unique choreography that made her smile with pure joy. Claire watched from the stands, her eyes brimming with emotion. Seeing her daughter so fulfilled, so connected with Starlight, was a daily gift that eased all the worries she carried as a single mother of a special child. The magical moment, however, was brutally interrupted. The deafening roar of a powerful engine cut through the air like thunder on a clear day. A red Ferrari appeared at the entrance of the center, deliberately skidding and raising a cloud of dust. The aggressive sound of the engine reverberated against the walls of the covered arena, amplifying like a sonic bomb. Starlight, caught off guard, reared up violently. Emily, even with her extraordinary connection to the animal, was not prepared for such a sudden reaction. "Emily, hold on tight!" shouted Marianne, running toward the two. Claire jumped to her feet, her heart racing, as she saw her daughter in danger. The horse, normally so controlled and gentle, spun in circles, its hooves nervously striking the ground. Panic took over its movements, years of training momentarily forgotten in the face of the scare. Nathaniel Adams emerged from his sports car, adjusting his expensive sunglasses with an arrogant smile on his lips. Completely oblivious to the chaos he had caused, he walked toward the center's office as if nothing was happening. "You need to stop," shouted one of the staff members, running toward him. "This is a restricted area with animals and children." The millionaire merely shrugged, his expression of disdain showing just how disconnected he was from the reality around him. "I came to see Frederick, the owner. I have a business proposal," he replied curtly. Meanwhile, on the track, a silent battle was unfolding. Marianne had finally managed to grasp Starlight's reins, trying to calm him with soft words. Emily, still mounted, maintained a surprising calm. Her fingers entwined in the horse's mane, whispering words of comfort. "It's okay, my friend," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's me, Emily. I'm here with you." Claire came running, her hands outstretched to help her daughter. Everyone's hearts were still racing, adrenaline coursing through the once peaceful environment. Gradually, Starlight began to calm down, but something had changed. His eyes, once serene, now showed a latent fear. His muscles remained tense, and small tremors ran through his body with every louder sound. "We need to get Emily off him," Marianne whispered to Claire. "Carefully, so we don't scare him even more." With calculated movements, they managed to help Emily dismount. The girl, as soon as her feet touched the ground, turned towards Starlight, her hands seeking the animal's muzzle. "He's different, Mom," said Emily, her voice filled with concern. "His heart is beating really fast." John, the handler, approached, with a halter, trying to lead Starlight back to the stable. The horse, normally docile to commands, backed away, neighing nervously. "I've never seen him like this," commented John, his years of experience with horses highlighting the seriousness of the situation. "That car noise, it was like something broke inside him." Emily reached her hands toward Starlight's nervous sounds, her face marked by deep sadness. "He's scared," she said, her voice choked. "I can feel it." The sound of raised voices came from the direction of the office. Nathaniel Adams was gesturing animatedly, seemingly oblivious to the chaos he had caused. His red Ferrari remained haphazardly parked at the entrance, like an arrogant intruder in a sanctuary of peace. The video of the incident, captured on a staff member's phone at the center, went viral on social media within hours. The footage clearly showed the red Ferrari irresponsibly encroaching on the space, the panic of Starlight, and little Emily in danger. The hashtag Justice for Emily became a trending topic, and the story of the blind girl and her therapy horse touched hearts across the country. Claire, sitting in her small living room, watched in astonishment as notifications multiplied on her phone. Journalists from various outlets were trying to reach her, eager to learn more about her daughter and Starlight. Emily, curled up on the couch hugging her favorite pillow, remained unusually quiet. "Mum," her voice finally broke the silence. "When can we visit Starlight again?" Claire swallowed hard, remembering the call she had received from Marianne earlier. The horse had spent the night restless, refusing to eat properly and reacting with panic to any loud noise. "Soon, sweetheart. Starlight needs a little time to calm down." At the Adams mansion, the atmosphere was equally tense, but for different reasons. Nathaniel paced back and forth in his luxurious office, annoyed by the incessant calls from his PR team. The image of the successful businessman he had built over the years was quickly being replaced by that of a callous villain. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, slamming his phone on the mahogany desk. "All this fuss over a scared horse? I have companies to run, I can't waste time on this." Juliet, his younger sister, burst into the office unannounced, her eyes blazing with indignation. "A scared horse? Is that how you see the situation, Nathaniel?" She threw her tablet onto the desk, displaying the furious comments on social media. "You almost hurt a blind child. Do you realize the gravity of what you did?" Nathaniel ran, his hands over his face, trying to maintain his composure. "It was an accident, Juliet. I didn't know there was a child there." "Of course you didn't know. You never know anything beyond your own navel." Juliet stepped closer to the window, gazing at the immaculate gardens of the mansion. "Do you remember Swift?" The name hit Nathaniel like a punch to the gut. Swift had been his childhood horse, a gift from his father. The memory he had worked so hard to bury was beginning to resurface. "Don't bring him up," Nathaniel whispered, his voice losing its usual arrogance. "Why not?" "Because it reminds you of how traumatized you were when Dad sold Swift without consulting you. How you cried for weeks." Juliet turned to face him. "And now you're doing the same thing, Nathaniel. You've traumatized an animal and a child who depend on each other." At the riding center, the routine had been completely disrupted. Other students and their parents expressed concern about the safety of the place. John, the caretaker, spent extra hours trying to calm Starlight, who now startled even at the distant sound of engines on the nearby road. Marianne had contacted Michael Johnson, an equine behavior specialist known for his work with traumatized horses. After evaluating Starlight, his diagnosis was troubling. "The trauma is significant," he explained to Claire, who had come to the center for updates. "Horses are extremely sensitive animals, and Starlight, being a therapy horse, is even more receptive to the emotions around her. The scare wasn't just from the noise, but also from the breach of trust in her safe environment." Claire tried to hold back her tears as she listened. "And how long might it take for him to recover?" "It's hard to say," replied Michael, watching Swift restlessly in his stall. "Every animal responds differently to trauma. What complicates things is that he's associated the sound of engines with danger. We'll need intensive desensitization work." The news of the cost of specialized treatment made Claire feel as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. As a public school teacher, her salary barely covered regular expenses. Swift's treatment would cost several months of her income. Meanwhile, on social media, the story was gaining new chapters. Former employees of Nathaniel's companies began sharing stories about his arrogant and careless behavior. Disability rights advocacy groups spoke out, demanding justice. The pressure on the businessman grew by the hour. At her home, Emily ran her fingers over the raised photos she had of Swift, a gift Marianne had made especially for her. Her small hands traced the outline of the horse's muzzle, recalling the soft texture of his coat, the warmth of his presence. The pressure of public opinion finally forced Nathaniel to visit the equestrian center. He arrived discreetly this time, in a more modest car driven by his chauffeur. The contrast with his previous entrance couldn't have been greater. The place was quiet that Monday morning, except for the occasional whinny of the horses. Marianne greeted him with a serious expression. "Mr. Adams, this way." She guided him through the stables, where several empty stalls highlighted the impact of his actions. Some parents had temporarily suspended their children's lessons after the incident. As they passed Swift's stall, Nathaniel couldn't help but stop. The horse, once majestic and confident, was huddled in the farthest corner, his ears pinned back in discomfort. "He was our best therapy horse," Marianne explained, her voice heavy with sadness. "We had a waiting list of children wanting to work specifically with him." Nathaniel felt something strange stir within him as he observed the animal. A distant memory began to emerge, himself at 12 years old in his family's stable crying while hugging Swift's neck. "How much—" His voice faltered and he had to clear his throat. How much would his treatment cost? Marianne looked at him in surprise. Michael Johnson, the specialist who evaluated him, charges $5,000 per session. He estimates we'll need at least 20 sessions. The amount was insignificant for someone with Nathaniel's fortune, but he knew it represented an insurmountable mountain for Claire and the riding center. Before he could respond, a familiar voice interrupted him. It's not just about money, Nathaniel. Juliet had arrived without him noticing. It's about acknowledging the impact of your actions. His sister approached Starlight's stall, and to everyone's surprise, the horse moved slightly toward her. Juliet had always had a special gift with animals, something Nathaniel secretly envied. Remember when Dad sold Swift? She continued, her voice softer now. You went weeks without sleeping properly. You said you had lost your best friend. Nathaniel felt his face grow warm. That was a long time ago, Juliet. But the pain is still there, isn't it? She turned to face him. I saw it on your social media. In 20 years of posts, there isn't a single photo of you with horses. You built an entire empire, but you never allowed yourself near a stable again. Juliet's words hit Nathaniel like successive waves, bringing to the surface memories he had buried deep. He recalled the late afternoons riding Swift through the fields of his father's farm, the feeling of freedom and connection he had never experienced again. Mr. Adams? The voice of John, the handler, interrupted his thoughts. There's someone who would like to speak with you. Claire stood at the entrance of the stable, her hands resting on Emily's shoulders. The girl held her cane firmly, her face turned toward the sounds of hooves and neighs. May we come closer? Asked Claire, her voice controlled but firm. Emily would like to tell you something. Nathaniel felt his heart race. It was easier to deal with furious lawyers and demanding shareholders than with a child he had wronged. Still, he nodded, momentarily forgetting that Emily couldn't see his gesture. You may come, he replied, his voice hoarser than usual. Emily walked confidently until she was just a few steps away from Nathaniel. Her small hands gripped the cane, but her face showed a surprising serenity. You hurt my friend, she said simply. Not his body, but his heart. Now Starlight doesn't trust the world like she used to. The raw sincerity of the girl's words struck Nathaniel in a way no headline or lawsuit threat ever had. There before him was a child who saw the world through her heart, who had built a connection with an animal as deep as the one he himself had once had. Nathaniel remained in the riding center long after Emily and Claire had left. His steps instinctively led him to Starlight's stall, where he stood watching the restless animal. Michael Johnson, the equine behavior specialist, seized the opportunity to approach the businessman. You know, Mr. Adams, horses are mirrors of our soul, Michael began, leaning against the stall door. They reflect not only our fears but also our capacity for healing. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, but something in the specialist's calm voice stopped him from making his usual sarcastic remark. What do you mean? Take Starlight, for example, continued Michael, gesturing toward the horse. Before the incident, he was a perfect example of how confidence can transform lives. Now his fear isn't just of the sound of engines, but of the possibility that his safe space could be violated again. The words hit Nathaniel like an echo of his own past. How many times, after losing Swift, had he himself built walls to keep his safe space from being invaded? What exactly would his treatment involve? He asked, his voice betraying an interest he hadn't felt in a long time. Michael smiled subtly, noticing the shift in the businessman's tone. We would start with gradual desensitization sessions, first recorded sounds at a very low volume, gradually increasing as he gets used to it. But the most important thing is rebuilding his trust in the environment and the people around him. Juliet, who had been observing the conversation from a distance, approached with a gentle smile. You know what would be interesting, Nathaniel, if you participated in the process? Me? Nathaniel took a step back, surprised by the suggestion. I don't know anything about traumatized horses. But you know what it's like to be one, Juliet replied kindly. After you lost Swift, you also needed time to trust again, didn't you? The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sounds of the stable. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories he had tried so hard to suppress finally surface. "How long would each session take?" he finally asked, his voice softer than usual. 2 hours, replied Michael, and it would be important to have Emily present at some of them. Her connection with Starlight could be crucial for the recovery process. Nathaniel picked up his phone, checking his packed schedule of commitments. With a decisive gesture, he began making adjustments, moving meetings and delegating tasks. "I'll pay for all the sessions," he announced, "and I want to attend at least 2 per week." The news of Nathaniel's decision spread quickly. Claire received the information with a mix of surprise and suspicion. Sitting in her small kitchen with Marianne, who had personally come to deliver the news, she tried to process the businessman's change in attitude. "He seems sincere," Marianne assured her. "You should have seen his face when Emily spoke to him. It was as if something broke inside him." Claire sighed, her hands tightening around her teacup. "And do you think it's safe to have him around during the sessions with Emily present?" "Michael will oversee everything," Marianne reassured her. "And honestly, I think it could be good for everyone. Emily has a special gift for seeing the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves." The next morning, the Equestrian Center witnessed an unusual scene. Nathaniel Adams arrived wearing jeans and a simple shirt, so different from his usual Italian suits. He carried a folder of documents with him. "These are the receipts for the transfer to cover all the sessions," he explained to Marianne. "And also, I brought this." From inside his folder, he pulled out an old yellowed photograph. In it, a 12-year-old boy smiled, hugging the neck of a majestic black horse. "Is that you and Swift?" asked Marianne, carefully picking up the photo. Nathaniel nodded, his throat tight with long repressed emotions. "I thought maybe we could show Emily. I mean, not exactly show her, but describe it to her. Explain that I also know what it's like to lose a special connection with a horse." The first therapy session with Starlight began on a particularly cold morning in Aspen. Michael had prepared the environment with care, removing anything that could cause unnecessary stress to the animal. Nathaniel arrived early, carrying a nervousness he hadn't felt since his first business negotiations. "Before we begin," said Michael, leading Nathaniel to a bench near the arena, "I need you to understand something fundamental about trauma in horses. They don't live in the past like we humans do. For them, every moment of fear feels like the first." Nathaniel listened intently, his eyes fixed on Starlight, who remained in the farthest corner of the arena, her ears alert to every movement. "That's why," Michael continued, "healing doesn't just come from overcoming the fear of sounds, but from rebuilding trust in the environment and the people around them." Emily arrived shortly after, accompanied by Claire. The girl brought something that surprised everyone, a small portable radio. "Mary helped me pick some songs that Starlight likes," she explained, her face lit up by a hopeful smile. Before the car incident, we always listened to music together." The simplicity and purity of the solution proposed by Emily moved everyone present. Michael immediately incorporated the idea into the treatment plan. "It's brilliant," he praised. "We can use the music as a bridge between the safe past and the present. A positive sonic anchor." For the next 2 hours, everyone worked in complete silence following Michael's instructions. The radio was placed at a safe distance, with the volume low enough to be just a murmur in the background. Nathaniel watched, fascinated as Emily moved confidently through the space, guided only by sounds and her memory of the place. Her connection with Starlight, though shaken, remained visible in the way the horse tilted its ears toward her whenever she spoke. "You know," Emily whispered to Nathaniel during a pause, "Starlight taught me that we don't need to see with our eyes to truly see." The phrase struck Nathaniel like a bolt of clarity. How many years had he spent blind to his own feelings, buried under layers of business success and arrogance? "How did you overcome it?" he asked, surprising himself with the vulnerability in his voice. "Not being able to see, I mean." Emily smiled, her hands playing with the hem of her blouse. "I've never seen, Mr. Nathaniel. I was born this way. But I've learned that every person, every animal, every place has its own music. We just need to learn how to listen." The wisdom in the girl's words resonated deeply with Nathaniel. He remembered how, after losing Swift, he had refused to listen to anything that reminded him of horses or his childhood. Michael took the opportunity to bring Starlight a few steps closer, gently guiding him with a long lead. The horse still showed signs of tension, but the soft music seemed to help him stay calm. "I'll tell you a secret," Emily said, her voice soft as if sharing something precious. "When Starlight is nervous, he taps his hoof 3 times on the ground. It's like he's counting to 3 to calm himself. I do the same sometimes." Nathaniel watched in awe as the horse performed exactly that movement at that moment. 1, 2, 3. The rhythmic pattern brought a strange sense of order to the chaos. "Swift used to do something similar," he revealed, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "He would shake his mane 3 times when he was anxious." It was the first time Nathaniel had mentioned Swift's name out loud in years, the he. Sound echoed through the riding arena like an old song finally set free. The following weeks brought a new routine to the equestrian center. The therapy sessions with Starlight became a ritual everyone looked forward to. Michael had developed a program that combined music chosen by Emily with recordings of engine sounds, played at progressively louder volumes, always respecting the animal's limits. Nathaniel, surprising everyone and especially himself, didn't miss a single session. His personal driver began to comment on how his boss seemed different on the days he visited the center, lighter, less tense. Even his phone, once a constant extension of his hand, remained silent during the 2-hour therapy sessions. "You've been different these days," Juliet remarked during a family dinner. "Your eyes, they have a sparkle I haven't seen since we were kids." Nathaniel stirred the food on his plate, thoughtful. "You know what's strangest? For the first time in years, I don't care about phone notifications or the stock market. When I'm there with Emily and Starlight, it's like time starts to make sense again." At the center, Starlight began to show subtle signs of progress. Her ears no longer twitched in panic at the slightest noise, and her eyes had regained some of the serene glow that once defined her. Michael explained that the desensitization process was working, but it was the constant presence of Emily, and surprisingly, Nathaniel, that made the real difference. "It's like an orchestra," Emily explained during one of the sessions, her small hands gesturing in the air. "Each of us plays a different instrument, but together we make music that Starlight understands." Claire watched the changes with a mix of relief and fascination. Her initial distrust of Nathaniel gave way to cautious respect. It was impossible not to notice how the businessman transformed in the presence of his daughter and the horse. His rigid posture softened, his voice lost its authoritative tone, and occasionally a genuine smile lit up his face. One morning, during a break in the session, Nathaniel surprised everyone by bringing a gift for Emily, a special album with embossed photographs of Swift and Braille texts telling his story. "I asked a specialized studio to make it," he explained, nervous, as a child at a school presentation. "I thought you might like to know more about the story of my first friend." Emily spent hours exploring each page with her sensitive fingers, absorbing every detail of the story. "He was as brave as Starlight," she commented after reading about how Swift had helped young Nathaniel overcome his fear of heights. "He was," Nathaniel agreed, his voice choked. "And you know what? I think he would be proud to see that I'm finally facing my fears again." Starlight's progress, though steady, was not linear. There were days when an unexpected noise would make him retreat, his body trembling with memories of the trauma. In those moments, it was Emily's unwavering patience that brought him back to the present. 1, 2, 3, she counted aloud, marking the rhythm with soft claps. Starlight, recognizing the familiar pattern, began to tap his hoof in the same rhythm, as if the counting were an invisible thread connecting them through the fear. Michael observed these interactions with professional interest and personal admiration. In 20 years of working with traumatized horses, I've never seen such a deep connection between an animal and its caretakers, he remarked to Marianne. It's as if Emily, Nathaniel, and Starlight are healing each other. Social media, which weeks earlier had overflowed with criticism of Nathaniel, now shared videos of the therapy sessions. The image of the arrogant businessman was gradually replaced by that of a man seeking redemption, learning valuable lessons from a blind girl and a frightened horse. One afternoon, as everyone prepared to wrap up another session, Emily made a special request. She wanted Nathaniel to sing to Starlight, the same lullaby he used to sing to Swift. Nathaniel felt his face flush at Emily's request. It had been decades since he last sang that melody, a simple song his mother had taught him specifically to calm Swift during storms. I'm not sure I remember it well, he hesitated, aware of the expectant gazes around him. Sometimes, Emily said softly, our heart remembers things our mind has forgotten. Michael seized the moment to make an adjustment to the therapeutic program. Actually, introducing a familiar and positive sound element from the past can be extremely beneficial. If you feel comfortable, Nathaniel, we could try. The businessman closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories flow. The melody was there, stored deep within his soul, along with the scent of fresh hay and the warmth of Swift's coat. He began softly, his voice hoarse and uncertain in the first verses. It was a song about stars guiding travelers home, about finding courage. In the darkest nights, gradually the melody gained strength, filling the arena with a different energy. Starlight, who was near the fence, turned his ears toward the music. His eyes, usually alert, softened. Emily, sensing the change in the atmosphere, smiled. He likes it, she whispered, her hands clasped on the arena railing. His heart is calmer, I can feel it. Claire, watching the scene, couldn't contain her emotion as she saw how her daughter had been instrumental in bringing out a side of Nathaniel that even he didn't know still existed. The businessman, who weeks earlier was known for his coldness, now sang with tears in his eyes, his voice carrying decades of repressed emotions. Michael gave a discreet signal to Marianne, who began recording the scene with her phone. This will be valuable for the treatment, he explained quietly. Starlight's response to the music is extraordinary. When the song ended, a special silence hung over the arena. It was Starlight who broke it, slowly approaching Nathaniel, the first time he had done so voluntarily since the treatment began. He wants to say thank you, said Emily, her voice overflowing with joy. I can hear his hooves. He's doing that special dance he only does when he's very happy. Nathaniel extended a trembling hand toward Starlight's muzzle, stopping inches away, respecting the animal's space. To his surprise, it was the horse who completed the movement, gently touching his hand with a velvety muzzle. This reminds me so much of Swift, murmured Nathaniel, his voice choked. He used to do exactly the same thing after I sang to him. Juliet, who had arrived quietly during the song, approached her brother. You know it wasn't your fault, right? The sale of Swift. Dad made that decision on his own. Juliet's words touched an old wound that Nathaniel carried. For years he had blamed himself, believing that if he had been a better, more obedient son, his father wouldn't have sold Swift. Maybe, Juliet continued, all this time you weren't just avoiding horses, you were avoiding forgiving yourself. Emily, with her unique sensitivity, sensed the emotional tension in the air. She approached Nathaniel and without hesitation took his hand. Did you know that Starlight taught me that sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves, she said, her innocent wisdom cutting through layers of accumulated pain. He got lost that day with the noisy car, but look, now he's finding himself again. And you are too, aren't you? The profound simplicity of Emily's words struck Nathaniel like a revelation. His entire business empire, built with iron determination, after the loss of Swift, had been a way to escape the pain, to prove his worth. But there, in that riding arena, singing an old lullaby to a frightened horse, he finally began to find his way back home. Winter in Aspen always brought intense storms, and that night would be no different. The equestrian center had prepared, reinforcing the stable structures and ensuring all the animals were safe and comfortable. John, the dedicated caretaker, decided to spend the night at the center. Something in his instinct, honed over years of caring for horses, told him that this storm would be especially strong. He settled into a small room adjacent to the stables, from where he could monitor the animals. Nathaniel was also restless that night. In his mansion, he watched through the large windows as dark clouds approached. The local news warned that it could be the biggest storm of the decade. Her thoughts inevitably turned to Starlight, remembering how Swift used to get nervous during thunderstorms. In her modest home, Emily was especially sensitive. The sound of the rain beginning to fall made her other senses even more heightened. "Mom?" she called, sitting on her bed, clutching the embossed album Nathaniel had given her. "Do you think Starlight is okay?" Claire tried to reassure her daughter, but she herself felt a growing unease. The past few weeks had been marked by steady progress in Starlight's treatment, and she feared that a stormy night might affect his recovery. Around midnight, when the first thunderclaps began to echo through the mountain valleys, Nathaniel's phone rang. It was John, his voice tense on the other end of the line. "Mr. Nathaniel, I'm sorry to call so late, but Starlight is very agitated. I've never seen him like this before, not even on the day of the incident." Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." "But sir, the storm is getting worse. The roads—" "It doesn't matter," Nathaniel interrupted. "I promised myself I would never abandon a horse in need again." Meanwhile, at the center, Starlight was showing increasing signs of panic. Each thunderclap seemed to amplify his previous fears, as if the trauma from the day of the sports car was blending with the natural terror of the storm. John tried to calm him using the techniques they had learned during the treatment. He turned on Emily's portable radio, which now stayed permanently in the stable, playing the songs that usually soothed him. But this time, the music seemed insufficient against the roar of nature. Claire also received a call from John explaining the situation. Emily, overhearing the conversation, immediately stood up. "We need to go, Mum," she said with determination. "Starlight needs us. Sweetheart, it's very late and the storm—" "Remember what you always tell me? That sometimes we need to have courage to help those we love? Starlight needs our courage now." Claire looked at her daughter, admiring her inner strength. Even in the deepest darkness, Emily always found a way to light. "I'll get our raincoats," Claire replied, already moving. The riding center, usually so peaceful at night, had turned into a symphony of nervous sounds. The other horses were also restless, reacting to Starlight's agitation and the violence of the storm. Nathaniel arrived first, soaked to the bone but determined. His imported car had gotten stuck on the dirt road leading to the center, and he completed the last kilometer on foot. "How is he?" he asked, taking off his soaked jacket. John shook his head. "Getting more nervous. I tried all the techniques. Michael taught, but—" A particularly loud thunderclap shook the stable structures, and Starlight neighed in panic, rearing up inside the stall. The sound of his hooves hitting the wood echoed like a war drum. "Hey, buddy!" called Nathaniel, approaching the stall cautiously. "Remember our song? The one about finding the way home?" His voice, though shaky, began to hum the familiar melody. For a moment it seemed to work. Starlight's ears turned toward him, his movements becoming less frantic. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from, and we'll continue. The moment of calm was brief. A new thunderclap, even louder, made the entire stable tremble. Starlight began to stir again, her eyes wide with fear. The progress of weeks of treatment seemed to melt away under the force of the storm. It was at that moment that Emily and Claire arrived, guided by John, who was waiting for them at the entrance with a lantern. The girl, though soaked by the rain, radiated a surprising determination. "Where is he?" asked Emily, her cane steady in her small hands. "In his stall," replied Nathaniel, surprised and impressed by the duo's arrival. "But he's very agitated. Maybe it's better." "Please take me to him," Emily interrupted, reaching her hand toward Nathaniel's voice. Claire wanted to protest, her maternal instincts screaming about the dangers, but something in her daughter's posture made her hesitate. There was a strength in that 8-year-old girl that sometimes left her speechless. Nathaniel looked at Claire, seeking her approval. With a tense nod, she agreed. The businessman then took Emily's hand, guiding her carefully through the stable corridor. 1, 2, 3 steps to the right, he instructed, mimicking the way he had seen Marianne do it during therapy sessions. Now 4 more steps forward. When they reached Starlight's stall, the horse was still thrashing, but something in his movements changed as he sensed Emily's presence. It was as if, even in his panic, a part of him recognized the calm energy that always radiated from the girl. "Hi, my friend," Emily said softly. her voice barely rising above the noise of the storm. "I know you're scared. I get scared sometimes too, you know." Her small hands found the wooden planks of the stall, and she began to tap lightly on them. In the same rhythm Starlight used to calm himself. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. "Raphael," she called, "can you sing that song again? But this time, let's do it like an orchestra, remember? Each of us with our part." The businessman understood immediately. He started the song again, his voice finding strength in Emily's presence. The girl kept the rhythm on the wooden planks, creating a percussive bass for the melody. Claire, observing the scene, spontaneously joined in, adding a soft harmony to the music. John completed the impromptu ensemble with a low, steady whistle, as he had learned to do to calm the horses. The improvised orchestra created something magical in that moment. It wasn't just music, it was a declaration of presence, of support, of unconditional love. It was as if each note was telling Starlight, "You're not alone in this storm." Gradually, the horse's movements began to calm. His eyes, once wide with fear, started to soften. His ears, which had been frantically twitching at every thunderclap, now remained turned toward the music. "It's working," John whispered, maintaining his whistle. "He's coming back to us." Raphael, without interrupting the song, watched in amazement, as Emily seemed to know exactly what Starlight needed, even without being able to see him. It was as if she could see with her heart, perceiving nuances that escaped the eyes of others. "Can I go into the stall with him?" Emily asked when she noticed Starlight was calmer. The adults exchanged worried glances. The storm still raged outside, and even though Starlight was calmer, he was still a large and potentially frightened animal. "I promise I'll be careful," she insisted. "He needs to know we're here, that he won't lose us like Nathaniel lost Swift." The mention of Swift made something vibrate in Raphael's chest. How many times had he wished he could have been present during a storm to comfort his childhood friend? How many nights had she spent imagining Swift frightened in some unknown stable, with no one to sing his favorite song? Nathaniel took a deep breath, making a decision that would change everything. "I'll go in with you," he said to Emily, his voice steady despite the nervousness. Together as a team, Claire stepped forward, worried, but John gently held her back. "Trust them," whispered the handler. "Sometimes healing needs a moment of true courage." With extreme care, Nathaniel opened the stall door. Starlight stepped back slightly but remained calmer than they expected. The businessman held Emily's hand, guiding her with slow, deliberate steps. "Tell him, Nathaniel," Emily urged softly. "Tell him about the first time you saw Swift." Nathaniel's voice trembled slightly as he began. "It was a spring day. I had just turned 12. Swift was in the pasture, proud and a bit arrogant, much like me these days." He chuckled softly at his own joke, noticing how Starlight tilted his head, interested in the sound of his voice. "Go on," encouraged Emily, her small hands still holding. No one could ride him properly. He was special like you, Starlight." Nathaniel spoke directly to the horse, but something in me made him trust. Maybe because, like him, I also needed someone who truly saw me. As he spoke, they moved closer. Starlight remained attentive, but his eyes had lost that panicked gleam. The storm continued to roar outside, but inside the stall, a nearly magical space of safety was created. "Do you know what else I learned from Swift?" continued Nathaniel, his voice choked with emotion. "Sometimes we need to lose something precious to understand its true value. I spent years building walls around myself, trying not to feel. But you, Emily, and you, Starlight, taught me that walls don't protect us. They only keep us from living." Emily smiled, releasing Nathaniel's hand to extend both arms towards Starlight. The horse, as if understanding the invitation, lowered its majestic head to gently touch the girl's hands. "See," she said, beaming, "he's saying he trusts us." It was at that moment that a particularly loud thunderclap exploded above the stable. Instead of panicking, however, Starlight simply moved closer to the two, as if seeking protection from those she had learned to trust. "How did you know?" asked Nathaniel, amazed. "How did you know he needed this?" "I didn't," Emily replied simply. "I just believed. Sometimes that's what people and animals need, someone who believes in them, even when they can't believe in themselves. Claire and John watched the extraordinary scene from the entrance of the stall. The caretaker, tears in his eyes, whispered, "In 30 years of caring for horses, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if they've created their own little world in there." The storm outside began to subside, but no one inside the stable seemed to notice. They were all mesmerized by the transformation they were witnessing. Nathaniel, the businessman once known for his coldness, now hummed softly as he stroked Starlight's neck. Emily, with her serene smile, kept one hand on the horse's muzzle, her sensitive fingers picking up every subtle change in its breathing. "I think I understand now," Nathaniel said, more to himself than to the others. It wasn't just Starlight and Emily who needed healing. It was me too. "We all need healing sometimes," Emily replied with her unique wisdom. "That's why we need each other. Like an orchestra, remember?" At that moment, something definitively changed at the riding center. It wasn't just Starlight who had overcome her trauma. It was as if everyone there had discovered a new way of seeing the world and each other. The morning after the storm, the riding center awoke transformed. The rising sun revealed puddles scattered across the ground and a few fallen leaves, but it also brought with it a sense of renewal. Michael, arriving for another therapy session, found a scene that left him speechless. Starlight was in the arena, moving with a lightness she hadn't shown in weeks. Nathaniel and Emily were already there, participating in the horses' morning exercise as if they had been doing it for years. The businessman, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, had a smile on his face that made him look decades younger. "Something extraordinary happened here," Michael commented after hearing the account of the stormy night. "Sometimes, it's in our most challenging moments that we find our true strength." Claire, who had gone home with Emily for just a few hours of sleep, returned to the center bringing breakfast for everyone. The simplicity of the gesture, sharing homemade bread and strong coffee in plain mugs, created a moment of communion that no one there would forget. "I have an idea," Nathaniel announced after taking a sip of coffee. "Actually, it's something I've been thinking about for a few days. But after last night, I'm sure." Everyone turned to him, curious. Nathaniel rarely showed hesitation, but at that moment he seemed to be searching for the right words. "I want to transform this center," he continued, "not just renovate it, but expand it. Create a space where more children like Emily can find their own music, their own path to healing." The silence that followed was filled with emotion. Marianne, who had just arrived, had tears in her eyes as she imagined the possibilities. "We could have more adapted arenas," she suggested, "more horses specifically trained for therapy, and a larger covered area," added John, "so that storms don't worry us as much." "And music," exclaimed Emily excitedly. "Lots of music everywhere, so that all the horses and children can find their own song." Nathaniel watched the suggestions emerge with an ever-growing smile. "I want more than that," he said. "I want to create a scholarship program so no family has to worry about costs. I want this place to be a beacon of hope." Claire, who had always been concerned about the expenses of Emily's treatment, felt her heart tighten. "Nathaniel, it's the least I can do," he gently interrupted. "You gave me back something I didn't even know I had lost, my humanity." Juliet, who had arrived quietly during the conversation, approached her brother. "Dad would be proud, Nate," she said softly. "Not for your business empire, but for this, for finally letting your heart guide your actions." Juliet's words struck Nathaniel deeply. For years he had sought his father's approval through financial success, when in reality, his true legacy was right there, in the ability to turn pain into healing, fear into hope. "Let's call it the Swift Equine Therapy Center," suggested Emily, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "That way your first friend will always be present, guiding other horses and people to find their way." Nathaniel felt his heart skip a beat. The name was perfect, a bridge between his past and the future that now lay ahead. "And you know what else?" continued Emily, now practically jumping with excitement. "We can create a library with Braille, books about horses, and make horse sculptures that children can touch to understand what they're like." Each suggestion from Emily opened new horizons of possibilities. Michael, observing everything with his experienced gaze, realized he was witnessing something greater than a mere transformation of physical space. It was the birth of a collective dream. The following months turned the equestrian center into a construction site full of potential. Nathaniel, who had previously dedicated his energy to numbers and negotiations, now spent hours poring over architectural blueprints and accessibility projects. Every detail was thought through with the care of someone who understood. They weren't just building structures, but creating spaces for healing. Emily became a constant presence in planning meetings, her suggestions always surprising the adults with her unique sensitivity. It was her idea to create a sensory garden around the tracks with different aromatic plants that would help with the spatial orientation of other blind children. Each flower bed can have a different scent, she explained enthusiastically during one of the meetings. Lavender near the entrance, rosemary close to the stables, mint on the way to the arena. That way, everyone can create their own maps. With their noses, Claire watched her daughter with growing pride. The shy girl who had once relied so much on Starlight for confidence was now becoming a little leader, sharing her experience to help others. "You know what else we can do?" Emily suggested at another moment. "Put different textures on the ground. Wood, stone, grass. Each type of flooring can indicate a different place." Nathaniel absorbed each suggestion with renewed attention. His office at the company, once decorated only with awards and certificates, now displayed colorful drawings, made by Emily and other young patients who had already started visiting the center. Juliet, seeing her brother's transformation, also decided to get involved in the project. Her marketing experience was crucial in creating an awareness campaign about equine therapy that soon gained national attention. "It's not just about riding horses," she explained in an interview. "It's about creating connections, discovering new ways to communicate, to express oneself, to grow." The video of the incident that had gone viral months earlier was gradually replaced by new images. Starlight galloping freely across the expanded field, smiling children experiencing the feeling of freedom on horseback for the first time. Nathaniel singing his special song in a circle of young patients. Michael, who continued to oversee the therapeutic program, watched with satisfaction as his methods were refined and adapted to different needs. "Every child is unique," he said during a training session with new instructors, "and each horse has its own way of teaching." Marianne, promoted to the general coordinator of the program, developed new care protocols based on her experience with Starlight. "What we've learned here," she explained, "is that healing doesn't follow a linear path. Sometimes we need a storm to discover our true strength." John, the dedicated caretaker, gained a team of assistants, but maintained his personal care routine with each animal. Every morning you could still see him quietly talking to the horses, establishing that special connection no technical manual could teach. One afternoon, while overseeing the installation of the new ambient sound system, one of Emily's priorities for the renovated center, Nathaniel found an envelope on his desk. Inside was an old photograph, yellowed with time, himself at 12 years old, riding swift. "I found it in the old family albums," explained Juliet, who had left the envelope. "I thought it could be part of the memorial we're creating at the entrance." Nathaniel held the photograph carefully, noticing how his boyish smile was identical to the one now beginning to reappear on his adult face. Beside him on the desk was a recent drawing by Emily, colorful shapes that, according to her, represented the music of the horses. The inauguration of the new Swift Equine Therapy Center was scheduled for a spring morning when the mountains of Aspen were adorned with their most vibrant colors. The space, completely transformed, still retained the welcoming essence that had made it special from the start. Emily, dressed in a special outfit chosen for the occasion, arrived early with Claire. Her hands moved through the new facilities with familiarity, recognizing every texture she had helped choose. "Mom," she said, stopping near one of the lavender beds. "Do you hear that? The birds seem to be singing louder today." Claire smiled, noticing how her daughter had grown in recent months. It wasn't just her confidence that had increased. It was as if her ability to perceive and interpret the world had expanded in unexpected ways. Nathaniel arrived shortly after, bringing a surprise, a children's choir from a local school. "I thought we could start the day with music," he explained, winking at Emily. "After all, it was music that helped us find our way here." The children in the choir positioned themselves near the new covered arena, their young voices quietly rehearsing. Among them were also some with special needs, representing the inclusion that would be the hallmark of the new center. Starlight, now fully recovered, held a place of honor at the event. His coat gleamed under the morning sun, and his posture exuded the serenity of someone who had found their place in the world once again. Beside him, other newly trained therapy horses awaited the start of the day's activities. "I thought a lot about what to say today," began Nathaniel, addressing the guests who were beginning to arrive, "about how to explain the transformation that has happened here. But then I realized that some stories don't need many words. They need to be lived, to be felt." He gave a signal, and the choir began to sing. The chosen piece was an adapted version of the old lullaby he used to sing to Swift, specially arranged for children's voices. The gentle notes floated through the morning air, touching everyone present in a unique way. Emily, holding Nathaniel's hand, smiled with tears in her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It's as if Swift is here too, isn't he?" "He is," Nathaniel replied softly. "In every note, in every child who will find their way here, in every horse that will help someone discover their own strength." The new center was much more than an expanded physical structure. Every detail told a story. The sensory garden with its carefully selected fragrances, the paths with different textures creating natural tactile maps, the sound panels that allowed children to explore different types of music. Michael, observing everything with professional satisfaction, commented to Marianne, "You know what's most extraordinary? It's not just the structure or the therapeutic program. It's how this place has become a symbol of how trauma can transform into healing." Juliet, who had coordinated the media coverage of the event, smiled as she saw how the journalists present seemed more interested in capturing the spontaneous moments of connection between children and horses than in taking the traditional posed photos. "Look at this," she said to John, who was adjusting the final details of the stables. "Who would have thought that terrible day with the sports car would bring us here?" The caretaker nodded, his simple wisdom finding the right words. "Sometimes we need to get lost to find a better path." A year after the inauguration of the Swift Equine Therapy Center, Emily turned 9. The celebration could not have been anywhere else, but in the space that had become a second home not just for her, but for dozens of other children. The center buzzed with activity on that special morning. Children of different ages and with various special needs moved through the carefully planned spaces, each finding their own way to connect with the horses and the environment. Starlight, now a respected veteran among the therapy horses, carried a special dignity in his new role. Besides continuing to be Emily's inseparable companion, he had become a kind of mentor to the younger horses in the program, showing extraordinary patience with the beginners. "It's amazing how he's changed," Michael commented to Claire, watching Starlight gently guide a new horse through the sensory trails. "It's as if he's turned his own trauma into a strength to help others." Claire smiled, her eyes following Emily, who moved through the space with a confidence that still surprised her. "Just like my daughter," she replied softly. "Sometimes I wonder who taught whom more in this whole story." Nathaniel, who now divided his time between his business and the center, had prepared a special surprise for Emily's birthday. For months, he had secretly worked with a group of skilled artisans to create something unique, an adapted carousel, where each horse was a miniature replica of the therapy horses at the center, including tactile details that allowed blind children to see every detail with their hands. "This," he said, guiding Emily's hands over one of the sculptures, "is Starlight. Do you feel the small star carved on his forehead? And here," he moved her fingers to another detail, "is Swift. He couldn't be left out, could he?" Emily explored every inch of the carousel with her sensitive fingers, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "It's like all our stories are here," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Juliet, who had become a constant presence at the center, coordinating expansion projects to other cities, watched the scene with a full heart. "You know, Nate," she said, approaching her brother, "Dad would be really proud right now. Not for what you've built, but for the man you've become." The celebration culminated with a special performance. The children's choir, now a regular part of the center's activities, had prepared a new version of Swift's song. This time, however, Emily had helped create additional verses, telling the story of transformation and hope they had lived. As the young voices rose into the afternoon air, Nathaniel looked around the space with a new kind of satisfaction. It wasn't the pride of a successful businessman, but the deep joy of someone who had finally found their true purpose. Starlight, as if sensing the importance of the moment, approached the group, his hooves softly marking the rhythm of the music. 1, 2, 3. His old pattern of comfort now transformed into a celebration of overcoming. "See that?" whispered Emily, her hand naturally finding Starlight's muzzle. "Now everyone can hear the music of the horses." And it was true. The Swift Equine Therapy Center had become more than just a therapy space. It was a place where stories of overcoming intertwined, where fears turned into courage, where silence found its own melody. The sun was beginning to set over the mountains of Aspen, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. The scent of lavender and rosemary lingered in the air, mingling with the final notes of the song. It was a moment of perfect harmony, where every element, humans, animals, nature, found its place in the grand symphony of life. "Sometimes," reflected Nathaniel, watching Emily lovingly embrace Starlight's neck, "we need to lose ourselves completely to find our way back home." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from, and stay tuned.